I should say too, just anyone who's listening, it's not that, you find your purpose and your light, and then all of the struggle goes away, and mental illness leaves the building. It's not like that, but it's just so much easier to, implement your daily practice to stay in the light because you're on the right path.
Everyone you meet every single day is fighting a battle you may know nothing about. We're all in the process of overcoming. I'm Justin Wren, and my story has been heard by millions of people through my book, my TED Talk, podcast interviews, TV shows, professional fighting, and my foundation, Fight for the Forgotten. I believe we are all overcomers if we choose to overcome. We all have the option. I've been given the opportunity to overcome childhood trauma, sexual abuse, immense bullying, depression, suicidal ideation, substance use disorder, and I am a 2-time suicide survivor. We are here to have conversations with some of the greatest minds of our time. Get ready to be inspired and to receive the tools and game plan to win this fight called life. Thank you for being here, for showing up for yourself. You, me, we have overcome 100% of our darkest days. I'm not done yet, and neither are you. This is your invitation to overcome. Sarah Evans, thank you so much for being here.
I am honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Well, I'm honored you're here. We have a similar, I think we're like-minded and like-hearted in
Absolutely.
Many ways,
Yeah.
and a very similar purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And we're pursuing that purpose with passion. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your story and then also how you became the founder of Well Aware.
Yeah, that's kind of a long story.
Okay, great. We've got time.
I have the abbreviated version. I find myself talking a lot these days about this journey because when I look back in retrospect, it all kind of makes sense.
Okay.
But then on the path, I had no idea what was happening. I will try to keep it succinct, but I was actually born in Australia in a very rural place in New South Wales in a hippie community.
Okay.
And we lived off the grid. We had no running water or electricity. And for the first 5 years of my life, that's how I lived. And I have the fondest of memories, if they are memories or just stories and pictures. But I think that's an interesting sort of foundation that I had, given now the type of work that I do, international development work in the most rural places of the world.
Right.
Where I'm very comfortable.
How would you get water growing up?
There was a river right next by the Kalang River.
Okay.
And actually the Kalang community is somewhat well known in the circles. This was in the 70s, where there were expatriates left and right and down under and other places as well because of all of the political turmoil and, at the time, seemingly unusual violence happening in the U.S.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Around the war specifically, the Vietnam War.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
and so to collect water growing up, you'd take a bucket, a jerry can. What would you do to go to the river?
Yes, we had buckets, and we would go back and forth, and we had a can, a tank, where we would keep the water, and we had an outhouse, so we weren't flushing a potty.
Wow.
So we only had the water that we needed for our garden,
Mm-hmm.
for our food, and then for our sanitation needs and drinking.
Yeah. So would I be correct in saying every time you needed to take a bath or a shower, you were getting water from the river?
Yeah, it was river water, yeah.
Okay.
And baths were kind of special, I guess. We were in the river every day as kids.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so that has translated into your passion now, helping people that are doing very similar stuff today.
It's one piece of it. Yes, I think so. I think so.
And sorry, continue your story.
Oh, yeah. Well, sort of like making a puzzle that comes together. So we ended up in a small town in East Texas where I went to school and grew up, and then to university here in Austin at UT. I majored in civil engineering. I didn't end up graduating in civil engineering, although I did well. I found myself drawn to speech and public speaking, so I majored in that. And then I went on to law school where I focused on environmental law. And I even clerked for the EPA Region 6 in Dallas in their clean water department. And so all of these things sort of make sense when I look back on them. But it wasn't until several years after law school that a friend approached me and asked if I would help put together a fundraiser to replace some of the livestock that were dying in this Maasai village in Kenya.
Hmm.
She had family ties to that specific region and, had this passion to help. And I had the legal, savvy to be able to put together tax-deductible donations. And I got really interested in this project. I think I felt like I fit in with this particular type of work or charity, I guess. I hate the word charity, but charity.
Yeah.
But even more than that, I thought, what if instead of raising money to replace the cattle and the goats, which are vital for these types of communities,
Yeah. Especially the Maasai being like basically shepherds.
they're pastoralists, exactly. So that the cattle and the goats are the way that they sustain their families.
Right.
And so but I thought, the reason that the cattle and goats are dying, because at the same time, one of Kenya's most significant droughts was happening. And the cattle and goats were dying because there was no water. And then there was this widespread suffering across this community, the entire region, the entire country, because of this lack of water.
About what year was this?
2007.
Okay.
And I said, well, why don't we, it's crazy, but why don't we instead raise money to drill a well? And then we can solve this problem with the livestock in this community. But look at all of these other, incredible things that we can make happen with this source of water.
Yeah.
And I talked my small group of friends into doing that.
Yeah.
Can be kind of convincing, I guess.
Okay.
But meanwhile, I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I grew up in East Texas, so I know what an oil rig looks like, but not a rig that drills for water. Turns out they're kind of similar. But so we proceeded. We filed the paperwork in 2008. It took a couple of years for me to have a side hustle that was figuring out this project. But we, lo and behold, had a really kooky fundraiser, which we still do today.
Okay.
In 2009, we flew to Kenya in January 2010, and we drilled that well. And I readily admit now that we got darn lucky. It was a great well. It's still providing water to that community today, 12 years later. But I was on that drill site for several days, and everything was just so new to me. I'm not a stranger to international travel and being in places that don't provide a lot of amenities, but the community dynamics and seeing how that in the eyes of these people, they knew how this new well was going to change their life.
Mm-hmm.
And me meeting the children and understanding their struggles, but how that was going to change because of
they can go to school. The wives have an option to go to work.
Yeah, then they have an income, and it impacts gender and equality. And then girls get to stay in school once they hit puberty and they start menstruating, because then there's going to be water at the school. They don't have to fall behind and drop out. All of these things I learned all at once, and so you can imagine it was pretty overwhelming. Also very humbling, but it was also the trigger for me that completely transformed my life. Mm. It was the moment, the day on the drill site when the well started first coming out. And I'll tell a little story if you don't mind. But there was a little girl on the drill site that was sort of following me around the whole time, and we were out there for 3 full days. Your shadow. She was my shadow, and she was precious and didn't speak any English at all because she wasn't going to school at the time. And she looked to be about 5 or 6. I found out that she was about 7 or 8 years old, but she was just malnourished and she was tiny. And when this, when you're on a drill site and you have your first water strike, it kind of starts to spew if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. And her eyes lit up and her whole body language changed, and she was saying "maji, maji," water in Swahili. And I said, "No, not yet, not yet." She was running up to go drink it and play in it. But then, finally, the end of the day, when we started flushing the well and the drillers gave us the go-ahead to get a little bit of the water, I filled up a really big one of those empty liter bottles of water we had in our van, and I handed it to her. And I picked her up and I held her and she drank it in what seemed like one big gulp. She just drank. And I was holding her and I could just kind of feel her relief. And I just knew in that moment that my life would have a very different path from that point on.
How old were you about then?
I was not that young, 31, 32.
And
Yeah.
up until that point, say from maybe 20, 21, we're getting out of school.
Yeah.
Did you feel that ever a similar sense of purpose, or was this that moment?
No, this was the moment. And
and were you searching for it, like actively searching for it, or it just kind of happened?
I wasn't searching for it. I didn't think it existed. And I'll tell you this too. I've only recently started talking about this, but from around my teen years, I've had some on and off pretty significant struggles with depression and anxiety.
Yeah. Like many people do.
Many people do.
Part of this podcast, Overcome.
Yes.
We've overcome 100% of our darkest days.
Yes.
And how do we rise up and overcome life's greatest challenges?
Yeah.
Because they're going to come. And
inevitably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I did not. So I had programmed myself. This is not my parents' fault. You know, they were hippies for being sake. You know, they really wanted me to just be happy. But I really decided for myself that success was, you know, graduating from law school, you know, being paid well, taking care of myself, and, you know, being able to take care of my own family and not rely on anybody else for that. And I was on that path, but I was not okay, right? And you know, had some really great therapists on and off, and you know, I've been on and off of anxiety medication since I was about 22 years old. But it just didn't feel to me, this is an individual experience, but for me, it didn't feel like it was worth it. It was all on track, but I just I could not be sad. And so when I feel like I lost a few years of my life because I was just sort of in limbo. Like I knew I was supposed to take the next step and I was supposed to do this, but I was phoning it in a lot of the time. I was drinking way too much, and not really taking care of myself in any way, shape, or form. And so when I spoke a minute ago about that moment on the drill site, that's when everything did click for me. And that's when I thought, I do have a purpose and this is it. It may not look exactly like this, you know, 10 years from now, and I get that. But I think I figured out where all of my skills and where my heart belongs, and the strengths that I have to offer to any path or company or purpose. It's here, and I think I just found it, and I'll do whatever I need to do to create that path. And I did some crazy stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I made it work.
Sounds like in that moment it was the spark plug to now what you've built, being an engine to continue to provide the same moment that you did for that little girl. Yeah. Now for many, many others, and spark plug, but really just the match to your purpose, the fire that you have now.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And you said that in those moments of anxiety or depression, you feel like you lost maybe a few years. Mm-hmm. Do you think that by pursuing this purpose, like you've maybe gained a few years or made up for those lost years, or that those were actually worth it so that you could appreciate these years now?
You know, nobody's ever asked me that. I guess I don't talk about it much, but I've never thought of it that way. And you might be right. That's really interesting. Maybe so. But I can't say within that time I was really educating myself or, you know, taking anything in that would help to lead me to where I was. But perhaps I did need that extended period of introspection and to not keep moving forward on the path that I knew was wrong for me, or leveling up on that path, rather. So maybe so. Maybe I need to forgive myself because I still beat myself up about that.
Yeah, I think the hardest person to forgive is oftentimes yourself.
Always.
And for me, I've gone, just so I could share a little I've had some very dark moments. I'm a 2-time suicide survivor. I've gone to treatment twice in my life.
Yeah.
And the first time I went to treatment, I thought it was a punishment
Mm.
that I'd wasted these certain amount of years. I had attempted suicide this many times. And so this was I went to treatment almost to punish myself, to beat it out of me.
Wow.
But the second time that I went, I didn't see it as a punishment. I saw it as an opportunity.
Right.
And so in only 30 days, I made up for, I got more in the first 5 days than I did 90 days at the first treatment center.
That makes sense.
Because I had the wrong attitude and perspective.
It's everything.
But now I can look back on both those experiences and be like, I needed them both. I needed the one where I didn't want to go, didn't want to be there, didn't put any effort in.
Yeah.
And thought of it as a punishment to realize the opportunity I had the second time I went. And
Amazing.
so, yeah, I think without the darkness, we don't appreciate the light as much in those good times.
That is absolutely true. That's true. And I should say too, just anyone who's listening, it's not that, you find your purpose and your light, and then all of the struggle goes away, and mental illness leaves the building. It's not like that, but it's just so much easier to, implement your daily practice to stay in the light because you're on the right path.
This episode of Overcome with Justin Wren, that's me, and Amy sitting over here, is brought to you by Onnit. Onnit.com/overcome. And what did we have for breakfast this morning? Because we were running a little late.
What have I had every day?
Since
really
we got
are
'em?
The Onnit protein bites, which I think are
Protein bites
new.
are delicious.
And I think I'm addicted. I love them.
Incredible.
I love that there's 6 grams of protein, so I can grab 2, and I feel really good about it.
Yeah, and they're small. They're small, but they're bites, bite size.
Bite size for
They're
you,
bite-sized,
maybe,
fun
but
size.
I can take probably 6 bites in them.
Yeah.
And so it's
Well,
about
it's just
the
not a
size.
huge protein bar that's hard to carry
Right.
around. Like
Right.
you can pack it in your purse, your fanny pack. You can carry it around, and whenever you need it, you got a little pick me up, and you're not going to be hungry. It's like a hunger buster.
It
but not
is.
from Dairy Queen, from Onnit.
Right, that you
And-
feel good about with
Yeah.
6 grams of protein in every one.
Right, and I love their cookies and cream. That one's been my favorite. S'mores been really good. but I
S'mores has
know
been
they
my
have-
favorite.
Really? I like the
Yes.
cookies and cream more. But s'mores is really, really good. And so what else do they have? They have peanut butter dark chocolate.
They do. They have coconut cashew with dark chocolate,
That one's
cookie
good.
dough with dark chocolate.
That one's
Somebody
good.
likes dark chocolate, and I appreciate that. And can we add that they're all gluten-free? So
Yes,
for you in
I
particular, it's-
have to have that because I am celiac. If you didn't know that, I am gluten intolerant. And not just intolerant, I literally have celiac. And so I get sick from a lot of the stuff on the market that's processed in a manufacturing facility with this, that, or the other. And on its stuff, you just know that you're getting the highest quality ingredient imaginable, possible on the market. And you're going to feel great. You're going to feel great about what you're eating and any of the products.
It includes more than 60 different plants. It's high in fiber and good flavor, along with that good source of protein.
Yeah. So try yourself some of these protein bites. They're so good for you. I think they might even be available at Walmart right now, but they're available on Amazon. They're available on its website. So please go get it there and use Overcome as the code to save yourself some money. Thank you for being here, and we will now return to the show. When you say daily practices, I'm stealing from Amy here because she's always like wanting to know the habits, the practices, like the principles, things like that. So
Yeah.
what's something now that has really helped you, maybe daily habits or practices?
I'm also now a single mother, and it's just me and my daughter. We live in a little condo, and she sort of forces me to stay on track. And I want so much to help her understand that just as just one little tiny individual, you can still make a difference in the world, and really want to set that tone for her, especially growing up in the world that she's growing up in now. But beyond that, and to be able to maintain that, I'm a very early riser. I get up around 4:30. So I can just kind of sit and meditate for about 30 minutes and drink my coffee. I like to be ahead of the day so I can own my day and the day doesn't own me. If I wake up late for some reason, which doesn't really happen anymore because I'm so programmed, I feel so flustered. I just can't get a handle of the day at all. I just sort of lose the day. And then I do yoga.
Nice.
just at home. And then I get in the shower, get myself ready. Then I help get my daughter ready and make sure she has everything.
How old is
ready.
your daughter?
She's 10 now.
She's 10?
She's rad.
Yeah. I have a Swahili proverb you can tell her, and you might have heard it, but
Maybe.
talking about making a difference.
Yes.
It says if you feel like you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a closed room with a mosquito. and I like that one because you've been to a lot of the same places I've been.
Know about the mosquitoes.
Yeah, I know about the mosquitoes. And then for me, I've had malaria 3 times.
Oh,
and so
wow.
I'm allergic to the prophylaxis and the pills. And so I get sick.
Wow.
So the first time though, a mosquito that weighs less than a gram, right? And me being a professional fighter, in 3 fights, I fought a guy 6'7", 6'8", skipped 6'9", and fought a guy 6'10".
Whoa.
I won all those fights, all in the first round. And those were huge opponents. But a little bitty mosquito,
Gotcha.
less than a gram, put 65 to 70% of my bloodstream being parasites. I was vomiting red and green, blood and bile. I lost my peripheral vision.
Whoa.
It was tunneled vision. It was black. And in front of me was blurry. And I was hearing it sounded like a bee's hive in my brain. Like just my ears were constantly buzzing. My veins were collapsing. They couldn't get IVs in me.
Were you overseas or were you here?
I was.
Okay.
I was in Congo. And then they
Wow.
evac'd me out, just MAF pilot and me, to Uganda. And they pulled me out of the plane. I don't even really remember it, but they pulled me from the plane. I didn't touch the tarmac into an ambulance. It wasn't really an ambulance, but it was in Entebbe. And yeah, I just remember that. And I heard that Swahili proverb after that. I think it was actually within the month I was recovering from malaria. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's so good. Because a little mosquito will interrupt our podcast right here, right?
Sure,
If it's buzzing on me, you, Amy,
Yeah.
like it makes a difference. And so how much more of a difference can your little bright light, 10 years old, what's her name?
Violet.
Violet. How much more of a difference can Violet make in the world,
Yeah.
even right now, than a little mosquito?
I
or-
love that.
Yeah.
The power of the small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell her about today when I pick her up.
Okay, great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you also said you didn't like the word charity.
That's correct.
I don't either.
Great.
Yeah,
I figured.
I said as our kind of our nonprofit motto, at least internally, is charity can be great, but opportunity is always better. And so we don't really give out charity because we've seen it hurt and cripple and enable or whatever you want to say, where that's not what they're looking for.
Not.
They don't want to hand out, they want to hand up. And they'll settle for a handout if that's the only thing available to them.
Obviously.
Yeah, anybody will.
If you're desperate, you'll settle for anything.
Yeah, but that's taking hope away. And in the water sector, this was the statistic. You could probably tell me if it's updated now. But just in the continent of Africa, there was over 230,000 broken water wells, which is billions of wasted charitable dollars because they weren't investing into the locals and weren't equipping them with the tools or educating them with the knowledge.
Yeah.
It was disempowering to them.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know of another study, but this is a little bit dated too, but they evaluated multiple water systems across East Africa specifically, and only 40% of them were functional.
Right.
And that's not okay.
It's not 60%.
60%
not working.
Yeah. And I'm writing an article right now actually on charity versus empowerment. I also don't love the word empowerment, but it
Can we go into that?
resonates.
Because I've said, because I've repeated what, sometimes broken English or Ugandan English, or it gets lost in translation where something here in the U.S. has started, I've noticed in like the last year and a half, where people are like, oh, we don't like that word empowering. It means you have the power and that they don't. And then I'm like, well, but this is the language they use. We want to be empowered. We want to be educated and equipped and all this stuff. So it's kind of a word that I've seen my teams champion. And I don't know if it's come from my language, but I think it's from theirs, asking to be empowered.
Oh, yeah.
And then, but what's your perspective on that word?
That's an interesting perspective. You mentioned I've not heard that one, although it doesn't surprise me. People really want to break apart semantics these days.
Yeah.
And
It's like, they're not worried about that word there.
I don't know. The reason I'm not fond of empowerment is because it's overused. It's a buzzword like sustainable, sadly, right? Because we can't really use them anymore and really get our our point across.
Yeah.
But
Because everyone's using it now, but
it
maybe
is.
not doing it.
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
I see that.
It's empty.
Yes.
But
Empty empowerment. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, I think of empowerment as me not having any power. What power do I have? I don't know nearly as much as they know about their direction and their potential for development.
Their culture, their community, all that.
Yeah, they really have the power to give us information about the resources that they lack and their plans for prosperity, and then we just plug in the resources that aren't there, and then we trigger their power, right? We're the catalyst for their power. They already have the power. They just need a few more resources to be able to use it. Interesting stuff. Yeah. But so I still use it because it is the word that I mean to use. Especially if I'm comparing it to charity, which, like you say, is more often than not these days, a hand out and a Band-Aid fix, which is doing more of a disservice to these communities than it is a service.
Can we talk about that for a little bit, like charity and opportunity, or however you would say it? Because for me, when people say, oh, you have to like the word charity and charitable giving and charity this, and I'm like, I just personally feel charity should be reserved for moments or situations or circumstances like war, famine, natural disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe people with disabilities, but oftentimes some of our guests that have been on here, our first guest, Nick Santodastasso, the perfect first guest for me, born with one arm, with one finger, and no legs, right? And he is a guy that says the greatest disability is a poor mindset, is a bad mindset. And he doesn't want charity. He wants to find out how to do it on his own. Yeah. So I think certain times, maybe people that can't help themselves, right? Then you come in and help in charity that way.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is disaster response.
Yes.
It's disaster relief. And that has to be charity because you are trying to, stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
But that's a very different type of philanthropy than what you and I do.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know the difference.
And what would you say we do instead of charity, or what are we addressing? Is it poverty? Is it community development?
It's development work, right? So, and again, everyone will say they're doing development work. Now there's the international development space, and now that means anything and everything. But true development means you're providing something that is a catalyst for actual development over time. And that's another thing that people get sick of me hearing internally is results over time. Is this in line with our mission to make sure that we're getting the results that we are telling these communities and our donors that will be those results over time? So it doesn't mean that once the water starts coming out of the well, we've been successful. To the contrary, right? That's really just the beginning of a long-term plan. It doesn't mean long-term and frequent intervention because we do a lot of training and setup up front to create self-sustaining water committees and water systems. But we don't leave. Yeah. Right?
Self-sustaining water committees, which I know that right there is very unique in the space. We do that as well, but
yes.
I just find it so, at times I've found it so disheartening. One of my last trips back, I pull up to a gas station, and there are, if you think of like a 5 that comes up on like when you roll a dice, 5, there's 4 gas pumps. In the center of those 4 gas pumps is a water well. And there's a line that's leaving. Like there's cars pulled up, but there's a line in between these cars that are filling up of all these school children that are there filling up their jerry cans. Now off to the right is their nicer bathrooms that you pay a little bit of Ugandan shillings for. Then there on the left, there's the latrines that you don't pay anything for. And then behind the fuel station, the gas station, is a trash dump where people are throwing out all sorts of crazy stuff.
This is in Uganda?
Yes. Right on the border of Congo.
Wow.
And I forget the sign of what organization did it, and I shouldn't name them even if I knew it. But also I just try to have a simple conversation with the owner of the gas station and saying, everybody's in line for this. He's like, yeah, it brings business. We partnered with this nonprofit.
Oh my gosh.
It brings business because they come in and they, for lunch or before school, after school, and they'll come buy biscuits or whatever it is. And I was just like, wow. And he goes, and it's clean. Look at it. It's clean. Holding it up and it looks clean to your eye,
No.
but you absolutely know if you did a water test, like that's so polluted,
Full of coliform.
dangerous. Yes, absolutely.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And just seeing the broken wells and everything else. So you guys are so different. And what's your organization? Where can people find it? And then how can people support? But why they should support is because y'all aren't operating at 60% failed wells.
Right.
You guys are at 100%. Yes.
Still
That's incredible.
12 years in.
Yeah.
Not for lack of blood, sweat, and tears, for sure.
Fightfortheforgotten.org. You can go check out Fight for the Forgotten, the foundation that I started. It is my passion project. It is something that I love so much because of the people we get to help. We get to help the Pygmy tribe who adopted me in help themselves. We say opportunity is greater than charity. Charity can be great, but opportunity is just always better. That's why we've drilled something like 80 water wells already, providing over 30,000 people clean water. We've started sustainable farms, bought back over 3,000 acres of land for the people who originally owned it, put it in their name. We built 32 homes, and now we're about to start a health center, a school, and a marketplace. They're going to have a maternity ward, a pediatrics unit, and a dental suite. You can join the Fight for the Forgotten Fight Club at fightfortheforgotten.org. We would love, love, love to invite you on this journey to join this fight arm in arm with us. Our Fight Club, it's a monthly giving club. You can give $5 or more a month, and that empowers us to empower people. Thank you for being on this journey with us. I invite you to come along for the ride. It's been absolutely epic, putting love and compassion in action and fighting for people. Fightfortheforgotten.org. Join our Fight Club.
Yeah, you asked me earlier if I feel like I've gotten back some years, once I found my light. And I probably so, but also, I bet this work ages you fast.
Yeah, sure.
It's absolutely worth it because I feel like I'm much more fulfilled human and empowered myself, I guess. But it's hard work. And so for us at Well Aware, this is our non-profit side. We also have another side now too that I'll touch on. But
is that Well Beyond?
Mm-hmm. So it's when I first started doing this work, I said I had no idea what I was doing. That was true. I got lucky on the first well, but on that first trip and the second, I really embedded myself in these communities, and I studied. I love to study and learn. I studied why all these water systems were failing and what the communities were saying went wrong, and started doing the work opposite to that, and ended up putting together a model that is quite successful now. I'm making it sound like it was all me. It wasn't. My driver on my first trip in Kenya, Mike Matuku, ended up being my business partner. We both worked for free, and he really led the way, to my understanding. So I credit him for that for sure. But we figured out, and then later on, when we had a little bit more funding, we did an actual study, and this was in 2013, I think. 2013, yes. And we studied on our own in Kenya 200 broken water systems to try to diagnose what went wrong. And we found that the top reason for water system failure was some kind of technical mechanical oversight. Not malfunction, but oversight. So that was either in the planning of the borehole itself, the implementation, which, as you know, anything can go wrong when you're drilling and casing a well, or then, proper maintenance.
Yeah.
But a close second to the top of the reasons for the water system failure is that lack of community
involvement.
In not just involvement, ownership. Let's say ownership, because that's what it is. But to be able to have ownership, you need a lot of information. Yep. And you can't really go into these communities once you drilled the well and say, okay, here's how you flip the float switch, and here's how you check the motor on the pump, and then exit and think that everything's going to go great for the next few decades. You can't just put a big piece of infrastructure out in the middle of nowhere and expect it to just run perfectly without guidance. So the model that Well Aware built then around those reasons is we have a team of engineers and hydrogeologists now all coming from within the local region, which is so cool. We have more staff based in Nairobi than we have in the Austin office
great.
now, which is amazing. And in Lagos now, because that I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited about this stuff. We have the team of experts that handle the technical side of things, and we also have a community team. So now we have 3 people who are dedicated to, and they're East African, which is really important, and they're dedicated to understanding where the community needs training and then tailoring training and communication and impact measurement around what the community input is. So we're not putting any kind of template solution on the technical side or the community side in any of these places. That doesn't work out very well. So there's a lot of thought and legwork and recon that goes into every single water system. And now we have more and more every day. But as our team is growing and our systems are in place, it's still going really well. However, this is my segue. Because we do not want to lose those relationships with every single community, we don't want to go back 20 years later and find out that a $50,000 deep borehole on solar power just stopped working and we didn't know, years later. But because of team bandwidth in country and because of the expense it is to drive around these regions. I mean, the fuel costs just keep going up and up and up.
Yep.
You do 1 mileage reimbursement for a trip from Nairobi into the bush and back, and that's a $300 bill just for one trip. So we decided that with the exponentially emerging technology available in these regions, even better there than here in some regards, Wi-Fi connectivity and mobile phone availability. And we have this expertise. And so why don't we just send all of this ongoing guidance and maintenance, reminders and even diagnostics on water wells into the hands of these people already holding the mobile phones who are using the well? Because that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the people using the well, I don't want to say should be accountable for the maintenance. They want to be accountable for the maintenance. They want that information. They want the guidance. If their water system goes down, their main source of livelihood is gone.
Yeah.
They're not motivated. They just need the tool. So we built an app.
Oh, that's great.
We built the Well Beyond app. It's a separate enterprise so that we could leverage investment dollars and scale more quickly because it is licensable to other NGOs.
Great.
But it's sort of built and born out of the work of Wellaware. Wellaware already uses the app, obviously.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really unique. I mean, because before there was Cash App and Venmo, everyone in Kenya, Uganda, Congo, they were just sending money to each other all the time, back and forth, getting paid that way.
M-Pesa is huge. Yeah. So we don't yet facilitate mobile banking, but we plan to in the future. Right now, the app itself, it's a native app, and it does regular maintenance reminders depending on the type of water system it is. You can open up diagnostics. You can send a support ticket. You can do remote chat support. Yeah. It all works offline except for the chat support. It has to sync when you have data. And then we're also programming in trainings and then our impact measurement that we do every year. And then so there's an administrative dashboard that we can pull up and see all of these things happening within every single project across each region.
Yeah, not even just mobile banking, but the WhatsApp was more popular there than it was here. And their modes of communication whenever they're out in the bush.
Absolutely.
They can send videos that way easier than they can FaceTime.
Exactly. Yeah. It's easier for them to open up an app and take a picture and send it across the planet than it is to fill a form, get on a boda, pay for the fuel, run it to town, find a print shop. Scan
in the documents and then email.
And that's expensive too. So
time consuming.
Yeah. So we're really excited about the potential for the tool.
Well, I know that through the process that kind of oversight during it, small little changes, really having accountability there. Yeah. Because there's been so many wells I've seen that, they built this water tower and they didn't plan for whenever a big rain was going to come and how heavy that is and how little their their base is
Yeah.
for holding this 1,000-pound well
Leaning
tank.
tower
Yeah,
of Pisa,
yeah,
it
and it just
crashes.
crashes down. You're like, oh
Seen
no,
that a lot.
all that work, all
Yeah.
that money, all that, and then it just failed because of an oversight.
Yeah.
What's y'all's? We have a few different ways of implementation, but what's maybe your go-to, and then some backups or things that you guys see that works?
You mean project types?
Yes.
Types of systems, yeah. So we always start with each community sending us a project request form that's available everywhere, wherever we have a digital presence, most often through Facebook.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah, everyone uses that.
Yep, they're on the phone.
There's not the. I saw a meme the other day, like I'm too young for Facebook, I'm too old for TikTok, I'm not pretty enough for Instagram, and I'm this or that or whatever. But
Yeah.
everyone uses Facebook.
Everybody.
Everyone's on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we start with a PRF, and from there, it's sort of like a process of elimination, because we're always aiming for a deep borehole that's just going to yield the most water. Usually won't require any kind of water treatment. But as you know, that's not always the best solution for various reasons. Most often because the water is, we can't really see it very well in our hydrogeological surveys. It's too deep to really identify where the high yielding aquifer is, or it's a fractured formation, and it's going to be really risky to drill. So, if we're looking at a $30,000-$40,000 investment for these communities, we want to make sure that we're starting out with the right solution for them and the geology that they've been, living on. So, we won't always drill. Only about 50% of our projects end up being deep boreholes. From there, we explore any kind of natural spring water. It's rare, but it happens. And then we preserve that spring, and we do pipelines. And then rainwater harvesting with ultraviolet purification treatments.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're planning on doing, right now, we're planning on doing our first water reservoir. And the reason is it's like 2 kilometers from Congo and Uganda, Western Uganda. And we have 3 boreholes out there, but one community, it's the first time I've ever seen them doing, and this is in like kind of the Rwenzori Mountains, but they are doing rock climbing to go get their water.
Wow.
And there's like 1,500 people that live there. And seeing the women and children and their feet scaling across these kind of cliffs almost, that might only be 10 feet off the bottom of the ground, or 20, 30, 40 feet up. It's like their feet are wider than the little ledge that they're climbing on. And we're not going to get a borehole. We've been trying, and just it's so rocky that it's not going to work. So we're going to set up this water reservoir where they have the 3 boreholes. Yeah. But in case of any sort of failure or anything like that, this reservoir will serve the other community and all the communities. And we're going to build a school, a hospital or medical clinic, like level 3 health clinic, which will have a maternity ward, a pediatrics unit, a dental suite, all this stuff. And then a community hub where they have a marketplace to where these actually 4 communities can all come to trade, because they walk over 2 hours to get to, no one goes to school because it's over 2 hours. No one goes to the health clinic hardly because it's over 2 hours. Yeah. But also the trade, the market is 2 hours away. So bringing it closer to them. And this is our first time doing this all holistic approach of like every spoke in the wheel. And so we have Project Cure that's helping us, and Engineers Without Borders that's helping us, and Conscious Coalition. And we're all bringing the experts in locally and internationally to make sure it's a success. But water reservoir is the first time we've been looking at this, but it was the best solution. And Engineers Without Borders suggested that. And then the Ugandan Engineers Without Borders team said, this will work. Let's do it.
I want to come take a look.
Okay. That'd be awesome.
I've only been to Uganda once, and actually we're strongly considering that to be our next active country. Great. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you, collaborate and learn from you guys and see what we can do to enhance your project work. But I'd love to see the reservoir. It's not off the table for us. I think maybe where we have been working in Kenya and Tanzania to date, we have typically either we've had a really good borehole potential in the pastoral communities, or adequate rainfall
Right.
in places where
Right.
borehole won't work.
We do have adequate rainfall there, and it's also the third solution. So we have a couple of the wells.
Infrastructure. You need infrastructure for rainfall collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Right.
we do have 32 homes there that we helped build, and there's plenty of roof to collect from. So
I want to go see.
yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm really excited that we get to know each other now.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to get more into Aware, Beyond, and how people can support.
Okay.
I know that anyone that can stroke a big check is awesome, but also a monthly donation club and people supporting you monthly is also huge, because that's just as big. You can plan.
That's
you can
right.
You can budget. You can scale off of monthly supporters.
Once you know what your funding is going to be each month, at least at a base level, you can line up those projects. You can do them faster. You can be way more efficient with those donor dollars. So thank you for saying
Absolutely.
that.
So for our listeners, I would love to tell them to go to the website and join the monthly giving club. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to get more of your story, because I would love to know, because we've had incredible guests, and you're one of the top of that list, helping other people, right? Like putting love and compassion in action, giving back, all that other stuff. Yeah. But what were some of the life's greatest challenges that you've had to overcome? Basically, the podcast exists because we want to learn how to win this fight called life. What tools, tactics, techniques, strategies, just like you approach drilling a complex problem in a borehole for a community that's going to help so many. What can we dig down into, drill into in your life that you're like, man, this,
I don't know. What can I say on this podcast? I did talk about the depression and anxiety, which got pretty dark for me.
What ages was that?
At different times. It started appearing for me as a teenager. About 15 or 16 years old. When I was 17, it got really bad at one point. But this is an interesting thing is, like, I never talked about it. I didn't even tell my parents what was really happening to me at the time. That's a me problem. I don't know why. I hope that young people who are struggling with this just talk to somebody about it. Because once I did become more vocal later in college, when I began to struggle again, got into that really kind of lower, dark place, I did choose to talk to my best friend about it at the time. And that was a part of kind of getting out of that and figuring out, new tools that I could use to stay out of it. And then, one of my biggest struggles was, not being a single mom, although that's a daily struggle, but when I made the choice to not be with her dad, we decided together, more or less, but it was just an awful time for both of us. And my daughter Violet was just a little baby, and so I had already started the work of Well Aware. It was still a fledgling young organization. I was still not getting paid, right? And I hadn't been getting paid for quite some time. I sold a house and I sold my car. I was like out of things to sell. And this, this baby was coming, and I knew, her dad and I knew that it wasn't right for us to be together because we were toxic and we would sort of like feed each other's bad habits. But I knew that if we weren't, I would lucky I have parents that would take me in, but I knew that we would need to go move in with them. That everyone I've been telling about this great path that I've been on, they're going to understand that, like, I'm broke, I'm a single parent, I'm living with my folks at the age of 36. It was just an incredibly difficult, but then very humbling experience. And now we lived with my parents for 5 years, and that was also not easy, but I knew it was right for her and me. And so I was able to then be what my baby needed me to be, and build this company. And so I made it work. It was absolutely not easy, but looking back, it was the right choice. So even if something you need to do to either get yourself on the path or something that's going to be really, really difficult, but you know will get you in a better place at the end of that particular road. Just I get asked a lot, especially by young people, just be brave, right? Because you're going to make it through it. Knowing that you're going to make it through it and being told you're going to make it through it doesn't really help. But it's that pain, like you mentioned earlier, it does really help to brighten the light. That contrast is so important, and then bearing that in mind and knowing that the light is coming is helpful. I can say that in retrospect easily.
No, that's great. It's the hope in the dark.
The hope in the
It's the
dark.
hope in the dark, and it's unique. Where we've shifted studios today because of a double booking, but we're in this and there's black curtains all around, and then there's these two big bright lights. And,
Right.
for me, I thought of your daughter as one, and then the other being well aware and your purpose.
Yes, that's exactly right. I
yeah.
just got goosebumps.
Oh, I did too,
it's
actually.
True.
Yeah.
That's exactly
And so,
right.
yeah, when you're sitting in the darkness,
Yeah.
looking for the light. Actually, Amy and I can relate to your story. Amy's been through 2 divorces. I've been through one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Amy can really relate on the single mother part, although their dads are still there and step up and
Yeah.
great guys. But Amy just had her 50th birthday.
What? Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure.
Look very,
I'm not sure either. I'm not sure either, but
Thank you.
yes. And we had
there.
Are you?
Yeah.
We had
It's
such a great
weird.
time at a place called Rancho Pillow, and
Yeah.
we rented it out for her. And 28 people or 24 people, her friends and family got to speak life into her. And what I'm saying it again because of the light, but every person said that she was the bright light or shiny and
Yeah.
different and all these things. But Amy, what do you think? I mean, we can talk about this in relationships taking those hard times to Amy's, for me, has challenged me to step up and be better, has called me up or called me out or called me higher, and has really helped me. But I think for me, looking at the past, not that my partner or ex-wife was a bad person, we were stuck in these toxic cycles that were going to continue.
Yeah.
And so we had to break that cycle. I think Amy's felt similar things to that.
Yeah, I mean, each time I got divorced, I had a child in that marriage, and it's just there's nothing like that to really challenge you
Yeah.
and your mental health, and you have to just find your own, I guess, mentality about it,
Yeah, it's true.
and say that doesn't make me bad
Yeah.
or whatever it is. So
It's also when I learned to ask for help. In every way, I had to ask my parents to
yeah,
take me in. I had to, I had to ask for a therapist, and I had to ask him for help every day. For a while there, I was talking to a therapist every single day, and I had to ask my team at Well Aware for patience and understanding. And yeah, you gotta ask for help. Now I'm really good at it, asking for help.
there's a benefit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You end up with
Wow.
these
Yeah.
skills that maybe came from somewhere really strange.
Yes.
And through learning to ask for help
Yeah.
for yourself, now you're able to ask for help for so many others.
That's exactly right. It's
yeah.
giving me goosebumps again. This is a crazy podcast. Yeah, and I think too, I'm able to teach my daughter to ask for help, especially now that she's in middle school. Like, please tell me when you need help.
And
Middle school sucks.
look at how different that is from what you said you wouldn't allow yourself to do whenever you were in teenagers
You're right.
or 17 years old. You
Yep.
wouldn't ask for help from your parents or share.
Nobody.
But you're teaching your daughter at 10 to go ahead and
Right.
do it. That's amazing.
Oh, I actually wondered about your daughter and how different your upbringings are, or at least your first 5 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I wondered how you see her life compared to yours and what you try to implement from your young life into hers.
Yeah, it's kind of hard, It's hard to replicate my experience, Although sometimes I do fantasize about running off to Australia and going back. We still have friends there. They take us in. But she is a very different human than I was as a child in a good way. I think, she is so confident. She just came out this way and funny, and everybody's her friend. She's just, magnanimous, I guess, as a child, as a human. But I have to stop myself from thinking that she's spoiled and privileged. And we live in a tiny condo. I'm talking about 1,000 square feet, and we have 2 cats, a dog, and a turtle. So it gets a little crowded.
We have a tortoise, a dog and a tortoise, no cat.
But I have to stop myself because this is just how she's grown up. And I for all of her life, I have thought I just need to get her to East Africa, but I didn't. Well, it's expensive, and I'm always so focused on work and doing 16-hour days when I'm there. But finally, I pulled the trigger, and this past summer, I brought her with me, and she was incredible. She was amazing. She fit right in. I could tell that she was experiencing it for the first time in a very different way than I did, and I sort of let it happen. I really backed off and kind of let it happen. So I now I'm going to bring her every summer. But I just no question, she loved it. I loved having her there. It worked out great. But I do think that has helped her understand how fortunate we are. And that her friend has a huge house, and instead of asking why we don't get to live in a big house, she's telling me now to turn off the faucet if I leave it running. So it's clicked for her, at least in that way. And I want to make sure that she's on the path that she needs to be on. I try not to have attachment to her taking a similar path that I did. Would be kind of nice. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that summer trip, it's kind of like the reminder that human beings can be so happy with so little.
That's just exactly the point. That's what it is. You add on all these other layers that we deal with here, and we have so many problems with everything, but you remove the layers and you're still the same human. It's almost like not having the layers allows you to just be yourself and love your family. I mean, as long as you have clean water and an education and somebody who can take care of you as a child. But those basic things, that's the recipe for happiness. It's not the fancy cars, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I used to drive a BMW. It was lovely. Had to sell it though.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of Amy's passions is helping people find their voice. And she does that with her own podcast, which maybe that should be a great guest for your show from all your great question asking, Amy. But,
Just let me know.
Yeah. But it sounds like even maybe through my divorce, but because Amy helped me start this show, and I'd been asked for 10 years to start a show, and I said no every time. But do you think through maybe both of y'all's perspective, like going through the divorce, maybe you found your voice and now you're helping others find their voice? Because you're advocating on behalf of so many people, women, children that don't have a voice. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. For me, I think. And my daughter's dad and I were never married. We were engaged. We didn't get to that point. Yeah, absolutely, I found my voice, and I had to find my real voice, and not the voice that I had created for myself up until then. And that was a lot of pressure too for me, being, like I said, like on this career path, and vocalizing things were not true for me, and so kind of being forced to find what my voice really was incredible. And yes, now I do use my real voice, and I have it.
What was the difference?
I putting, for lack of a better term, like putting on airs. And pretending to be excited and pretending to be dedicated about my job. When I moved back to Austin after working at a securities firm in Dallas, I worked at a law firm in Austin, and I would just tell everybody, this is so great. I'm so fancy now. I just met Barack Obama. He was running for senator at the time, and I'm like, but that part was cool. But I was not nearly as excited as I said I was. Was not looking forward to these things. It was hard for me to get out of bed in the morning to get myself at the office, because I was lying to myself and everyone around me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, from a perspective of like saying it out loud and trying to, make it real.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it. Yeah.
Versus really tuning into what's real for you.
Yeah. And at the same time, my body was rejecting all of it. My depression and anxiety manifests physically, with, fatigue and my body was telling me that it wasn't right. I just didn't know that I would need to listen.
Hmm. Let me ask you this, because I heard a study recently that 85% of the American workforce is unengaged, unmotivated, uninspired.
Yeah.
I also heard something like 60% or so of the American population feels indifferent. And I think insignificant were the words. So for more than half people walking around feeling insignificant or indifferent, and 85% in their work feeling unmotivated, unengaged, like that it's not important. How do you think people can either find that spark that you found, which I know an easy low-hanging fruit would be join and support you guys?
Exactly. That's my first choice.
Yeah. But also, I mean, you found it, and you had to be brave, and you had to be bold, and you had to sacrifice, and you had to get out of a relationship. You had to go back home, and maybe you thought it was going to be 5 months or 6 months, and it was 5 years.
Yeah.
But it's led you to where you are now.
Yeah.
And I think that I just personally feel like the world would be completely different. Every person would already have water if we focused on it. Kind of similar, but I thought this before COVID and the worldwide response to it. But when I was in Africa, I lived there for a year. I've built up over 2 years there now in the last 10. But when Ebola happened, I was there. And then I saw the world respond to it from there. And I thought, man, like this isn't even a thing that's truly going to spread like wildfire, but there's 3 million people a year dying of dirty water. It's like we could end this thing if people just weren't quote unquote ignorant on it. And I don't mean ignorant like they're dumb, but they just don't know about it.
It's the information.
Or indifferent once they do know about it.
Yeah.
You read a stat and you can forget about it, or you hear about it and it can go in one and out the other. Yeah. But when you get there, when you see it, whenever you hold that child and you feel their body change from hydrating, you just will never forget it. Yeah. And so,
fighting back tears at the moment, but but you're right. And back to your question about all so many of us walking around and feeling that insignificance, and I don't know. There's a word it's not coming to my mind, but ennui. But it's like more than that. It's that you don't have any power of your own as a human. And I talk to a lot of people who express this to me, and they look at my journey and say, how do I do that? How do I get that moment and build that path? And I think this is my personal opinion, but I think I'm right. I think that we are designed as human beings to help and support each other.
Exactly.
We are. Do you know the Ubuntu word?
Yes, but please go ahead and share it.
I've got a tattoo on my forearm that says Ubuntu, and I think it's a Zambezi word, but it's understood across East Africa, and it means I am because we are. That is humanity, and I think that a lot of us don't know that, or we've forgotten about it. We've started focusing on the wrong things because there's so much available to us now. But we are designed to help and support each other. And if we're not doing that, there's going to be an emptiness. And I have never talked to a single person working in an organization like ours, or who has donated or come to volunteer, or just helped me write thank you notes. I've never spoken to someone who said, man, I really wish I didn't do that. Everyone says, I feel better now. My day just got brighter. I sent a friend a picture of a water well he helped to fund yesterday, and he said, "You really just made my month. I was having a really bad day. Business is off rails, but now I feel better as a human being." But it can be as small as helping your neighbor, right, or checking in on an elderly friend, or making sure that you're in correspondence with a friend who's suffering in some way. But we're designed to do it. If we're not doing it, we're going to feel like something is lacking. And I think that's at least a very good step.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think I can relate to you where people are saying, oh, how do I find that? Or people that say, maybe this is a little bit more sad, but they'll say, oh, I could never do that. And it's like, well, you're looking at what's happened after 10 years. Like you're looking at our like second, third quarter whenever you're just getting in the game. And so just start somewhere.
It was a mess in the beginning.
Start somewhere. Start small. Just have your head on a swivel, looking to make a difference wherever you can. Yeah. Maybe it's in your neighborhood. Maybe it's in your own home. Yeah. Maybe it's at your school or workplace or whatever, but just start somewhere, do something, and then it can start to grow from there.
It will.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a seed and you plant it and it can't help but grow.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. Well, this has been really, really great. And I'm really, really thankful for
my favorite podcast so far. Don't tell
everyone
else that.
Okay. I won't. I won't. But what would you say for people that, I don't know, I think so many times we have these limiting beliefs and we count ourselves out. Mm-hmm. And someone might look at you and say, wow, she's done this and she's done that. And whoa, the normal is 60% failure, but hers is 100% success. And someone might be either thinking they couldn't do what you do, or maybe someone's thinking they know what their purpose is, what their passion is, what their calling is, but they haven't pulled the trigger yet. But to start and to allow yourself to almost like tend to that fire or like put some kindling on it. And how did it start to grow for you where once you started speaking it out and saying, I'm going to do this, you started getting some real traction?
I did. Yeah. I'm a very stubborn person.
Okay.
And in this way, it has served
Amy
me.
just looked at me and laughed. Because
You're stubborn. My daughter is too, and you should see the two of us alone together. Sometimes it's pretty interesting. But I push it. Perseverance is it's an interesting word too, because it's, you commit and you keep pushing regardless of how hard it is. I kind of have to say, like, in order to give up, like, do what I did and sell my house and my car and still be a single mom without income, I had to have some kind of safety net. So I don't want people to see that and say, well, I could, as a single mom, I couldn't do that, right? I don't have that safety net. But there are avenues, and again, going back to asking for help. And so I'm so honored that now I get to mentor young people, mostly women, but even some young men, and help them find the dots and help them find the resources and the plan and the path. And for me personally, even with my safety net, I didn't have any connections to resources to figure out how I was going to do this. I would read the local paper every day, and I found a hydrogeologist one time, and I called him up, and he agreed to meet with me. And then I went to the meetings in Victoria, Texas, for their water council. I did some crazy stuff, because I knew that I knew what I needed to find out in order to do what I needed to do, and I was throwing darts. But if you're persistent enough to look in all the places that you should and be open to the information that you're receiving, and with each meeting I attended or, person I called out of the blue, the path became a little bit clearer. And so it is just a lot of trial and error. But if you have a clear vision, it doesn't have to be a path or a 5-year plan. Who knows what they're doing in 5 years? But a vision, and you're working toward that, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. I could have given up a lot in the first couple of years of Well Aware because it was not looking like it was going to work out, especially when I got pregnant. Yeah. But I just kept looking, and then it came together.
Yeah, kept looking, kept swinging, kept going to the plate and taking big swings. I like that. What do you think is one of your favorite stories that has come out of Well Aware, or the work that you do and the passion and the vision that you set? Maybe you could say it this way, where what is kind of either it's your personal vision or the vision as an organization, like what you hope to obtain or where you're headed. Mm-hmm. And then from that, maybe you can match it up with a story that like kind of embodies or encapsulates the vision.
That's a big question.
I know. Sorry. It just came to me.
I'm just taking notes.
Just off the top of your head. Yeah.
Yes. So, I think, let's see, and two, like my vision hasn't necessarily evolved over time as much as it's bit refined. Especially now that we have this app to help with the maintenance of water systems.
You probably had no idea about that 10 years ago.
I don't know how to build an app,
Yeah.
but I found people who do.
Yeah.
But I want to. This is going to be similar to yours, but I want to change the way that these water systems are done in these regions. Full stop. A lot of that has to
Full stop.
Yes. A lot of this has to do with the way that donors and supporters and general public is educated here. And there's too much information out there that once the water's flowing, it's done. And everybody, calls it a day. But then there's a lot of work.
Literally washes their hands of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And didn't even look back. What's that? But, organizations like yours and mine, we have a responsibility to talk about that, to educate our own donors, every now and then in a subtle way, in a gentle manner, call it out when you see it going, wrong, and then collaborate more.
Yeah.
Right? We really got to share some more information. And I have visions for the app, the new tool too, to connect NGOs in this way too down the road. But
that's incredible. You're basically inviting people in, saying, this is what we've done, but we're inviting you in.
Yes.
And I know whenever I started, it seemed like, it seemed like everybody needed me to be part of a big NGO to even take a meeting. And I was like starting it, and I'm like, well, this, no one's there. I got to go. And but then it almost seemed like people were pretty guarded, or walls up, or not willing to be open-minded and collaborate.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm really excited about this project we're doing now, because it's all about collaboration and finding the experts to teach and train and empowering, make sure it's sustainable.
Yeah.
But that's really unique. And then so from what you've learned and kind of that vision and how you're kind of redesigning how it's done. Well, because I think for context for the listeners, if because we're talking and we have the experience and we've seen it and everything else, but I think the traditional model for NGOs in the water sector, I would say I used to call it the show up, blow up, and blow out technique, where you arrive with a parade, you throw a party, you get your pictures, and then you kind of peace out and move on to the next one. And some of these organizations have such big budgets, such high quotas, so many metrics to hit that they almost are set up for failure, because their donors are expecting them to get to 5,000 wells this year, and if they only got to 4,000 or whatever it is, right? Too high of a number to really have the implementation that teaches, trains, and equips.
Implementation, and then the follow up, the maintenance. But you're nail on the head here about this and the budgets and delivering information to donors or funders or grantors or holding them accountable. But why are these metrics not about those results over time? Right? Like that. There's a whole evolution of thought and education that is going to come from our conversation right here today.
Yeah, let's go.
The metrics, and there's no standardization of the metrics. That's one problem. But also the metrics need to be the performance of this infrastructure at least 5 years later. When you've seen this, and I see it too much, it's still heartbreaking. You'd think I'd get used to it. But these broken water systems, and where you talk to the communities and they move to their families and they started businesses, and then it breaks and the NGOs nowhere to be found, and they're worse off than they were before you got there.
And at 5 years, the hope and the goal would be that, hey, this well was serving, this water source was serving 1,500. But 5 years later, we had to drill another or two, and now it's serving 10,000, 15,000, or something like that, where it's grown over 5 years instead of down to zero.
Because it developed. Development is real development.
Infrastructure, yes. Yeah, I love it. Wow. So for your heart, your personal story, in those moments that you've wanted to, maybe you haven't wanted to quit, but where maybe the average person without this calling that sacrificed this much would have quit. What kept you going? Maybe there's a story you've held on to. Maybe there's a moment.
Yeah. I still think about the little girl on the drill site every day. She just sort of lives in my heart now. There's another story too, which goes back to when I mentioned my vision being refined over the years. And when I felt like if there were a time in the past, 14 years that I would have quit, it would have been when I had my daughter. And so what happened was when she was born a couple of weeks early. And so my team of volunteer engineers and hydrogeologists were in the field on a drill in Kenya at the time. So they couldn't reach me for a couple of days while I was in labor. When I finally got to talk to them a couple days after Violet was born, and I was up in the middle of the night, you don't sleep much at all for years.
Yeah.
I'm still looking for sleep, actually.
Me too. And I'm 17 and 13. I was
so tired.
17-year-old just took a job that works on the weeknights that she doesn't get off till 11. And we're like, wait. She has to stay up until she gets home and at least text.
Sorry, sidetrack. Okay, anyway, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, kids, man. But so I was up in the middle of the night. I had her. I was breastfeeding her, and my team finally got to call me, and they were like, "What's going on? What happened?" They were drilling, and they said, "We just hit way more water than we thought we were going to hit. It went really well. Things are great." And so I'm on the phone with my team on the other side of the planet, and I'm holding my baby, and she is, getting her nourishment from my body, and goosebumps again. But I realized in a very similar way in the moment on the drill site that I got it. All of a sudden, the pain that mothers feel in these communities, and the worry is not a strong enough word, but it is torment knowing that what you're providing for your baby might kill them, or you may not have what you need to provide for your baby. I couldn't really even wrap my head around it until that moment.
Yeah.
So that changed.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a story.
Reignited my fire, I guess.
Yeah, reignited it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of my favorite ladies is women in this world is a woman named Mama Mariamo. And she was one of our third or fourth well that we drilled. Mm-hmm. And she lost 5 of her 7 children due to waterborne disease. 5 of her 7 children. Mm-hmm. And after this, I can show you some pictures where a before and after. Actually, that's on my computer, not my phone. But it was the worst water source I've ever seen anyone drink from. Yet Mariama was blind. So she couldn't see it, but she knew it. She still knew it was stagnant. It had green moss or algae. I mean, it was and you had to move it out of the way to fill up your jerry can. And since she was blind, she was dependent on other people to provide her and her 2 children, small children, with water every day. And so that moment for me, I have a before and after picture of like the water they were drinking and then like water from the well. And it's night and day difference. It's like, this is what it's for. And I've been to the World Series and the Super Bowl and the NBA Finals and the biggest fights ever. And I fought in front of tens of thousands or millions on TV. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that the moment you see a village, a community, whether it's 1,000 people or only 100 people, get clean water, the cheers and the celebration, the depth of joy. And it's not like a game they're celebrating the victory for. Like, this is like the game of life, or a victory over death that's going to bring life. Yeah. And they get to take the medication to fight waterborne disease and drink it with clean water instead of wash it down with dirty water. That instead of just going to allow them to survive, like now, no, they could literally thrive because they're getting the parasites, bacteria out of their body and washing it down with a sustainable source of clean water. The hospital that we're going to build, or the level 3 health clinic, the only reason it's not a hospital in Uganda is because it doesn't have an OR, where it doesn't have an operating room and do surgeries, and is because we're building that in honor of a boy named Andy Bo. And Andy Bo was kind of the moment of conception for Fight for the Forgotten. And I didn't know about the water crisis, and I was holding a little boy named Andy Bo. He was in between me and his mother, and your story reminded me of this, like the nourishment. Mm-hmm. Because I remember seeing her, and this is a Maputi Pygmy village, and we're sitting there, and so she's topless, and but you can count every rib. You can see every rib connecting to her sternum. Yeah. And I'm cupping his little head and holding his little hand, and she's got her hand in her mine, and blood comes out of his ears, and he takes his last breath, or he actually took his last breath, and blood came out of his ears, and he passed. Well, she was sitting there now all alone. Her other son had already died. Her husband had already died, and now she was all alone. And that moment was just like, oh my gosh, this is just because of dirty water. And discrimination too. They were denied hospital treatment just because of their tribe. But I was like, whoa, like letting that sink in. It was like I was blindsided. I didn't know about the world's water crisis. Right. And I was coming home to give my dog clean water that they're walking 6 miles round trip for. Right. Or I was going to use the restroom and clean water that they would probably walk 8 miles to get instead of their water source of 6 miles. Those moments just like, they never leave you. No. And
become part of the fabric of who you are.
Yeah. I think it was real culture shock for me. And you said you're well-traveled and everything else. And so I grew up in Texas. You have a very different story than me. And I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay, yeah.
But I remember kids in like geography class or whatever, and teacher talking about different states even. And kids being like, maybe sixth graders being like, why do we ever need to leave Texas? We got everything we need here. And I'm just like,
that's a very Texas thing to say.
Right? We got everything. This is the best place ever.
Yeah.
And after the travels, it truly broadened my spectrum of like what life is. Yeah. And what I need and don't need.
Yeah, for sure.
Or what I want and don't want, and how I want to contribute, and things that just aren't important.
Yeah. I think is it Mark Twain that said travel is the death of all discrimination? Or something like that. I
don't know.
I think I just botched that quote. But.
No, Amy's going to look it up so we can talk about it. But what would you say that quote means to you?
Yeah, well, I think because, in so many ways. But because we,
yes.
Yeah,
Mark Twain.
Can you repeat it one more time?
I nailed it.
Amy, read it one more time for us so that we.
Well,
the quotes are,
travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness.
That sounds much better.
No, yours was the point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, like we tend so much these days to separate ourselves from other people, and then we have this inherent sort of fear of the other and judgment because all we know is what we've been told or read or, grew up understanding. But once you go to these other places and you experience, in a very small way, their lives and what they've been exposed to, you start to understand where they're coming from or why their circumstances are the way that they are. And then, you eat the food and you learn a little bit of the language and you start to just connect more to other cultures. And then that connects you more to our greater humanity.
Yeah. And
big picture.
Yes. And what you were saying about, we all live under the same blue sky. It's one big neighborhood. Yeah. But when you said with well aware, you said it in some way that now I'm trying to relate it and think, we have so much more in common than we do different, but you seeing that, you being with them. Okay, this is how I'd set it up. My second time I went. First time, rocked.
Yeah.
Second time, it was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I don't want to make all the same mistakes that I hear, are crippling communities. So what can I do? And I went and I lived there for a month, and it was like, people were like, what are your goals? What are you going to do? And from the second trip, I got the first goals for the third trip, which was buy 30 acres of land that is theirs and build 2 water wells on it that is theirs, and they can farm and it's theirs. Amazing. But the second trip, the 4 goals were live with, listen to, learn from, love them, But if I didn't do those first three, whatever way that I tried to show them love probably wasn't going to be sustainable
absolutely right.
or long lasting.
They're very real.
It was going to be short lived or very
Or
real.
mutual.
Yeah. It was going to, but I had to live with them and immerse myself in the culture to then listen to them and learn from them. But it sounds like that's what you did from the very start, even creating the relationship with the driver.
Yeah.
What was his name again?
Mike,
who your driver became a business partner, and then he was able to teach you so much.
He's our project manager now.
Yeah, wow.
He oversees a staff of 7.
Wow. Look at that.
Yeah.
So how much have you learned from listening?
Everything.
Yeah.
100%. I knew nothing coming into this. Yeah. I had to listen. I had to ask, and I had to listen. I had to listen well. I think it's, especially in these communities where we work, Justin, it's conversation and community is a gold standard. And it's one thing to go into a place you've never been and you look really crazy to them and give them interview questions. And then it's another thing to be invited in and sit down, in the boma for 3 hours and have a tea. Go to a bush church for 5 hours, and just be there, with their direction and guidance, and gain that trust. And then information emerges, and then the relationship begins to build. But you have to spend the time, because that's, where we're working, that's what they honor as relationship building and trust. And so that must be done. It's pretty fun too.
Yeah.
The tea's pretty good.
Yeah. The tea is good.
Yeah.
Chai.
Yeah.
Always
The chai.
right.
Yeah. It's very sweet.
Yeah. Very, very, very sweet. Well, Amy's been wanting to go. I want to take her with me.
I haven't been.
You've got to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's got to come. So maybe if you come see what we do, maybe we get to come see what you do.
Let's plan it.
Okay.
That would be amazing. I'm headed back in December, right after Christmas.
Awesome.
But
I might take a solo trip. With the founder of Engineers Without Borders in October. And then maybe we can go back. So,
I like being there for New Year's Eve. They call it the crossover.
Nice.
It's more of like a spiritual thing than a party. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah. What do you love about that? Amy's all into spirituality. And
So are you.
Yes, but you had a ceremony for turning 50 where
I
she was
did.
all alone and writing down vows to
Which
herself.
is the same idea,
That
moving
sounds like
forward. And
something I would do.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What have you noticed about this crossover that you enjoy or like?
Well, people just start talking about, what they've learned in the past year. And it's not like New Year's resolutions. It's more like, this is where we have come, and it's a time to spend with family. And, they don't even do Christmas the way we do. There's not a bunch of presents and stuff. It's just about family and food, lots of food. And so it's people coming together and connecting and talking about how more they want to become who they're supposed to be and what they're going to let go of. And it's lovely. It's much more lovely than midnight with too much champagne.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
For me.
For us, Amy and I have been going through, I would say, a sober journey, like sobriety.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's close to 10 months. And
It's amazing.
Amy, is it 6, 5,
no,
4?
like 4.
4? Yeah. And Amy I wouldn't say she had a problem with it. I had a definite problem with it. And so it's very good. And I've had extended periods of sobriety, like 4 or 5 years, and then fell off and then stuck in the cycle, and then 6 months, and then
it's hard.
back down, and then 9 months now. And, but for you saying that about champagne on New Year's, like, there you would see that you don't need that.
No, it's not even available. Yeah.
Right, not available.
Yeah.
And that you don't need it.
No.
But I think it's so common in our culture to just have a drink with any celebration or dinner or
Yeah. Especially in Austin, it seems.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around that. Law school revolved around that. Working at a law firm revolved around that.
Yeah.
It's too much in our culture.
At Amy's party, we had a night, and then we had a pool party. And at the pool party, someone came up and I said, "Oh no, I'm sober now." Like, "No, that's okay. I still have mushrooms." And I was I'm like, "No, I'm sober.
Like all of it.
Oh, not Austin sober. Like I've got weed,
sober.
I've got mushrooms. I got
that's hilarious.
You just don't drink, right?" I was like, "No. Like I'm not doing any of it."
Hilarious.
Yeah. So, but for you, I was wondering, because you said anxiety and then you also went back to depression, and then you said something about drinking a little too much, maybe in that season. Do you think that drinking contributed even more to depression and anxiety?
Yeah. It was a vicious cycle. Because I would get low and want to drink my headspace out of it. And then, what the excessive amount of alcohol does to your body for days, just put me down a little bit deeper. And so then again, to the store, too much booze, deeper, feeling horrible, deeper. And then it gets harder and harder to climb out. Absolutely fed each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It took me until having a kid, really, to really change my relationship with that particular crutch.
Did you say you were 31 when you had her, or what age?
I was 36 when she was
36
born.
when you had her.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
And what are some healthy habits that you found that help you, your mental health, or even your relationship with her?
Yeah. Well, my yoga is pretty sacred to me for physical health, but also just to kind of connect with myself and my body and set the tone for the day. Also, Violet and my daughter and I
love that name, by the way. Violet.
I do too. Yeah. She's not flowery at all, right? But it suits her.
Maybe vibrant, though? Vibrant,
she is
like
vibrant. That is correct, yeah. And also, violet, the color is like the seventh chakra.
Okay.
Yeah. But she...
What is that, the seventh one?
I don't know.
Head? Crown? The crown?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
That's cool.
But she and I, because we're stubborn, but we each individually have a tendency to get frustrated or not really understand how to problem solve in the moment of things. And so we have a practice together, just the two of us, where we do deep inhale and exhale, and we invite good energy in, and we shut the bad energy out, and then we make the sound of how we feel.
Oh, wow.
Which can be really interesting. And so we kind of do that together. And when she was younger, I would use it with her to kind of get her settled down and in her own body space again. And now she'll do it with me. She'll say, "Okay, mommy, let's do it." And you make the sound of how you feel.
Oh, that's great.
And it's like, it's surprisingly effective.
Yeah?
Yeah, to bring energy back to peaceful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
we do that together.
I wonder, because I'm not a parent, and maybe for people that are listening that aren't parents, what's been something that you've learned from parenting that maybe you can parent yourself better, like being a good parent to you?
You know what? That's a good question.
That you wouldn't have learned without having Violet, Like maybe there's something that when you're in your younger years, you didn't really think about, but through being a parent and loving her or teaching her, you're like, I could use this for me.
This hit me so hard, and it was a life changer for me, is self-judgment. So I've just been, and I still am, I have to work on it still till I die, I'm sure. We all do. But so hard on myself for every mistake and every, accidentally insulting thing I ever said. And I, when Violet was little, I had that really fantastic therapist. And I was saying, I'm so mad at myself for this. Like, I just can't get it out of my head. Like, I'm a horrible person. And he said, okay, imagine your daughter, at that same age. How would you feel about her if she did that same thing? And I thought, well, I'd forgive her. I'd help her forgive herself. Like, it's not that big of a deal. He said, okay, then.
Yeah.
Did you see what just happened? So now I do understand through being a parent and that new perspective that I can be easier on myself. And I kind of need to be to illustrate to her that she can be too.
That's really, really good. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because as someone who isn't a parent, and me being an athlete and a competitor, like sometimes I would think the more critical I am on myself,
The better you'll be.
The better I'll be. So after a loss, I would always want to feel it as hard as I can.
Me too.
And lean into it and not look away from it and not give myself grace or anything like that. wasn't necessarily a sore loser outwardly, but inwardly, big time.
Same.
So that I'd really feel the burn of it. But, when a friend, a teammate would lose, I'd be right there to encourage them, to be like, hey, it's okay, man. Like it was a mistake. You got caught.
Right.
And you can learn from this and let's look at it objectively.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about that for how you do that for Violet and how that therapist came in and said the same thing, that's very helpful for me because I can oftentimes be very critical, but grace,
space and grace. We need it for ourselves before we can provide it for other people. I know that now too.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Would you say that you saying that or sharing that was something learned, like a skill that was developed? Because I knew that. Okay, I'll set it up this way. When I started Fight for the Forgotten, I was coming out of addiction and depression. Not that I didn't continue to deal with it, but I'd be so quick to give love away. But even in giving it away to others, I still wouldn't give it to myself. It would like people try to give it to me and then I would just give it right away to somebody else. And I wouldn't let it actually sink in, or I wouldn't love myself first. And Amy's really helped me a lot because she said things like, you got to face it all, feel it all so that the magic can happen or miracles can take place.
Feelings are hard.
You got to love yourself like your life depends on it. Why? Because it does.
Yeah.
And until I was actually separated from society and working on myself, doing that deep work, I didn't really understand the importance of like self-love and grace and all those things. But in the early days, when you have a daughter and you're starting this, did you allow yourself to like love yourself while trying to provide love for your newborn and for the other mothers out there?
Gosh, I probably got closer to it, but this is still something that I need to work on.
It's a process.
It's a process.
Yeah, me too.
Forever. Because I don't know what it is about me or maybe humanity, but I don't feel like I deserve it a lot of the time. Or if I pause to take it in, then I'm gonna miss the ball on the next move, and but this is not healthy, and it absolutely doesn't make me a full human to be able to tackle the things that I want to tackle in the world. Doesn't. I want to mention that the biggest thing beyond just my daughter that has helped me get closer to this is my staff. Because asking for help and pulling in people who know a lot more than I do. I mean, when I started building a staff and I was the boss, I didn't know what I was doing there either. And I really kind of relied on them to tell me how to be as a boss. And I needed to really keep my mind open about that. And I built a culture and a team around what these young people were telling me was going to, make them feel valued and productive. And now it's a really remarkable culture. I think people who come to the team they're never going to leave, like this is the greatest place.
How would you define or break down what that culture is?
So so
what makes it
it's
special?
This nurture and this, it's this space and grace and kind of meeting people where they are emotionally. So when I started to train myself to be able to do that and be less rigid with traditional Gen X 80s movies style leadership, I realized that by providing, them that space and grace and additional flexibility and less micromanagement, they were thriving. And I thought, well, maybe I should do that with myself. Maybe that's where I can thrive too. And so even over the past 2 or 3 years since our staff on both sides have been growing, I've seen myself, and I don't often give myself credit. So I'm going to do it right here, right today,
Let's
on
go.
record. But I've become a much more patient person with my team, and I think as a result with myself. Because what happens is I'm more of a mentor now to the staff, well aware because we have an executive director. And so I hear myself saying, okay, you got to forgive yourself. What do you need to do, to feel valued again? What do we need to do? What kind of time off do you need, to bounce back from this? And in doing so, I'm starting to more listen to myself more. It's like, wait, what kind of time off do I need to bounce back from this? So I'm kind of taking my own advice.
Well, that's great.
And I think it's working.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really grateful. This was perfect for today. The timing of it, and we could have had potentially something else. And then, anyways, this was perfect. It got rescheduled, and I think it was because the universe wanted it today. It conspired in our favor to happen today.
I got COVID for a reason.
Yeah, well, sorry about that. But then,
Fine.
Yeah. This is awesome. Where can people find both Well Aware and Well Beyond?
Thank you for asking.
And find you to be able to follow.
Yeah. I am pretty vocal on a couple of social channels about water issues and, this community and water system stuff. So Well Aware, the NGO, is wellawareworld.org. And their handles on social across the board is Well Aware World. Well Beyond, if you want to check into that, it's wellbeyondwater.com. And then for me, my Instagram and my Twitter is Sarah Aware, SarahAware. And on LinkedIn, I'm Sarah Nell. I have a Southern name, Sarah Nell.
Yeah, I really like it. Well, that's really great. I wonder, just to wrap it up, are there any resources that have changed the game for you or changed the way you live?
Interesting.
That you would just be like, man, maybe it's one of the young women that come into work for you that you're like, this really helped me. And you've kind of given it to them as a resource. Any of our listeners?
Yeah. Yes. This is not any kind of silver bullet, but we all always now, anybody who comes to the team, board member, intern, staff, whatever, we have them read the book Abundance.
Okay. Who's that by?
Diamandis, I think.
Maybe we need to read that.
It's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
It's a little bit older now. I think it came out in 2012, but it's a wonderful read that really changed my perspective of my work and my world and my attitude toward my work. It's about a handful of different global crises, but what is being done to tackle them. And it really offers it gets a little philosophical. It offers a perspective on approaching how to make a big change as well, which was really helpful for me. So it's informative, but it's actually a pretty optimistic read. And there's one chapter specifically on water.
Great.
That's actually the only required reading for our staff.
Yeah.
But they end up reading the whole book because it's a great book, Abundance.
That's awesome. And then if you had to say for your life or for the life of the organization, what imprint would you want to leave on the world, or what impact would you want to make, or what would, if you could put it on a billboard for people to see while they're driving by, or they're driving on their commute to work today and they're listening to our podcast, and you could say one thing or two things to them, what would that be? What imprint would you want to leave? And then to sum it up, how would you do that?
It's another
it's a big, hard question. I'm sorry.
Playing a billboard. It's a lot of pressure.
No pressure. No. Just from your heart. Like, what imprint do you want to leave?
I'm just kidding. I really, if I can, on my deathbed, look back and say that I've accomplished something and be the proudest I could possibly be, it would be to have changed the water charity sector, and so that all NGOs are doing this work, at least with the effort and resources into creating systems that are correct for each community and are going to actually last a long time, just the way that we promised.
Almost like a new standard where every organization is 100%.
Yeah. I mean, how
you're going to do it.
How great would that be? I mean, all the resources that are dumped into our sector. Like if they would just go to water systems that would last, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this.
Yeah, you're right. And then maybe on final thoughts, like a billboard of how how they could live their life or how you want to live your life. Like, the reason I asked this question is I've only asked it maybe 2 times on the podcast, a couple times, but I asked my grandfather this before he passed. And it was just like a day or 2 before, and I was with him when he passed, and I shared the eulogy at the funeral. We actually just talked about this yesterday with Amy. But it was really powerful. He basically said, for him, he said, love God, love people. Basically, is how he wrapped it up was, I hope people just know that I wasn't a religious man, but I knew God was there and that he loved me and I loved him and that I could trust him. People say you can't trust God, but I can say the way I live my life, you can. Then he goes, and then just love people, whoever they are, wherever they're from, whatever color they are, just love them. I was like, it's pretty good. Love and love.
Yeah, I agree with him. I think too, I wish that people would understand that those extra layers that I spoke of just don't matter. It just causes more problems. And it's easy for me to say I built a life without a lot of extra stuff in my personal life by virtue of the nature of my work. But it just doesn't matter. It just
doesn't serve you.
It doesn't serve you. It just adds extra problems, and just like the basic humans that we are is just, that's what's special. You know, all the extra stuff is not. It's just distracting from who we are and what we're meant to be. That's what my billboard would say.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having
Thank you for being here. This was great.
I
Charged me up.
Loved this.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, people can go check out all the links in the show notes to follow you, to follow your journey, your organization, to support. There'll be a link to donate in the show notes as well. And thank you for spending this time with us.
It was my honor.
Wow.
Thank you.
Hey, don't forget to send your Overcome stories to overcomepodcast@gmail.com. And also rate, review, subscribe, and follow Overcome with Justin Wren.